and welcome to Our Mind Gym with Renae, a Team Ferris original production where we believe that motocross is more than just going fast. It is an empowering vehicle that teaches us how to navigate life. Join us weekly as we discuss the life lessons and growth mindset that give us a competitive advantage both on and off the track. Episode 1, here we go. I am your host, Renae Ferris, best known in the motocross community as the wife of Australian Motocross Champion Dean Ferris, mother of the 2 little blonde girls running around the tracks, and co-founder of Motocross Masterclass, a holistic online training program to help motocross families put all the pieces together, mind, body, and bike. As only an amateur rider myself, my contribution to the masterclass is, of course, the mindset component. In today's episode, I wanted to share some of our story with you, to give you an insight into the foundation of Team Ferris, starting with our background and how I stepped into this work. So here we go. Long story short, Dean and I first met back in early 2006 when I was only a measly 14 years old. We were both racing at a lot of the same motocross events, and so we inevitably ran into each other. From the day we met, there was something there, but unlike me, who's seen motocross as just like a social weekend hobby, Dean had a bigger vision. It was his last year of juniors, and he'd just made the decision to go all in on his racing. So our attempts at dating as teenagers were, let's just say, one heartbreak after the other. As a teenage girl, I was searching for someone outside of me to make me feel special, to give me constant love and affection, to put me first. And, well, that was never going to happen with Dean. He was preoccupied trying to work out how to build a career out of motocross, constantly trying to work out how he could be a better athlete. And so when it came to girls, he was avoiding anything serious in case it got in his way. To be completely honest, though, I did not understand this one single bit back then. I just thought he was being a jerk, and the story I told myself was that I wasn't good enough. I had no idea what he was going through or what it would take for him to make it. Yep, looking back, I can see that we were seeing the world through 2 completely different lenses. We were not even in the same book, let alone on the same page. And because I was still in my teenage mind and off living in my own little world, I had no idea the magnitude of career moves that he was making. And so at the end of 2009, when it all fell apart with Honda and he lost his factory ride, we fell apart too. He was dealing with real life issues and had no energy or tolerance for my teenage drama. So my attempt at playing hard to get was one big flop. Nope, he did not fight for me, not one bit. Instead, he put in a hell of a year on privateer Honda here in Australia, and then he secured a ride in Europe to chase his dreams on the World MXGP stage. We stayed friends, but the whole romantic part of our relationship was done. Well, at least I thought so. We were not only on completely different paths, but we were now living on opposite sides of the globe. Dean was traveling all around the world, chasing his dreams. He was experiencing both the highest of highs and the lowest of lows as he tried out all different training methods and strategies in his search for greatness. Meanwhile, I was back here playing it safe, following the script, finished year 12, got a good job, bought a house, found a nice boyfriend, got a dog, bought an investment property, and chased promotions at work trying to climb the corporate ladder. But little did I realize at the time just how unfulfilling this was, how much my life lacked meaning and purpose. I was doing everything you should do, and I was miserable, constantly looking for that next thing that will make me happy. Then, at the end of 2015, Dean signed a contract to return home to race in Australia, and he contacted me straight away. You know the whole fighting for me thing that I wanted like 6 years earlier? Well, here it was. Better late than never, I guess. He assured me that even though he couldn't commit when we were younger, he knew now what he wanted and that he'd spend the rest of his life with me if I would have him. This was both exciting and terrifying for me, as it meant walking away from everything I was building, going against every recommendation from friends and family, and basically just following my heart, which led me back to Dean and motocross. I won't bore you with those details in this episode, but I will say that I'm grateful every single day for the opportunity to do so because of what happened next. The first few months were pretty clunky. Dean was more hungry than ever to win the Australian Motocross Championship, and I was naively going about my life in honeymoon phase, still not realizing the magnitude of his efforts. We were in a relationship, but at that time, living quite separate lives. I'd just kind of turn up on the weekend and cheer him on. He was finally willing to let me into his heart, but not into his mission. He'd worked so hard and was still working it all out at that time that he was quite hesitant to actually bring me in. I could tell he was holding out on me, but I knew after all those years that it was just because it was so important to him that I was basically just willing to accept it. I had so much respect for what he had achieved and how committed he was to it that it just wasn't my place to interfere. Then we got to round 5 in the 2016 MX Nationals at Wanneroo. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's a really deep sand track in Western Australia. And because Dean had spent so much time overseas riding in Lommel sand, his technical skill and fitness really shined. So the first race, he went out, got the whole shot, and won by like almost 30 seconds. The second race, he went out and did the same thing, whole shot and dominant win. The third race is where we all come unstuck. Instead of getting the whole shot, he came out of the first corner in second place. Now, you and I just chatting about this now are like, that's a pretty good position to be in. And if we were using our logic and our logical thinking, we'd be like, okay, well, in that position, he's clearly faster than all the competitors that day. He was fitter than the competitors, and he had such a huge competitive advantage already that all he needed to do was be patient, look for an opening, and make the pass. Or worst case, finish the moto in second place and still get the overall and the championship lead going into the second half of the season. But for any of you who followed us back then, that was not what happened. Instead, Dean's emotions and deep desire to not only win, but dominate took over that day. Only a couple of corners in, he made a rushed decision to try and make a pass in a place that he had no room, and he basically landed on the back of Kirk Gibbs. And so he went down like a sack of potatoes, got taken off the track by the medics, and we spent the night in hospital. So lost the overall, lost the championship points lead, lost his momentum, and scared the shit out of me. All completely unnecessary, completely avoidable. And so this was like a real turning point, both in our relationship and in his career, because it really opened my mind to the fact that there's a mental game playing out right here. And it was like, almost like at that moment, it all hit me at once. All of our whole history, all these years, I realized that he was going on like with a mental thing in his mind at the same time. You know, I was so far in my head all the time, just thinking about me, that I had no idea, you know, because he's a man and, you know, appears strong. I had no idea just what he was going through in his own mind. So I tried to talk to him about it, but he just got mad. And it had been like a deja vu of his career. Win, crash, and basically not being able to put it all together. So like, I remember even the media would refer to him as like a ticking time bomb. Here I was, the girlfriend, thinking he, you know, being so proud, thinking he was doing so good. And I'd read these articles where everyone's like, oh, he won't be able to last. He won't be able to sustain it. And I just realized in that moment that the reason everyone was doubting him was because he had a history of not being able to put the pieces together. And so it really opened my eyes to something, and it showed me that there was so much more to racing. I wondered if we could work out how to get his mind to work for him, maybe he wouldn't have to crash so much. Maybe the sport wouldn't be quite so risky. So pretty much because he wouldn't listen to me, I gave him an ultimatum in the car and I asked him to let me in on his mission to be the best so I could try and help him. And so with a bit of convincing, he gave in. And not long after, I quit my job. I moved in with him. And basically, I started studying everything I could get my hands on relative to mindset, sports psychology, and human behavior. Pretty much deep dived. I'm a bit of a nerd at heart. So I got studying, realized as I was learning it too, the more I learned it, the more I wanted to learn. So I just kept going and going. And pretty much after just realizing the size of his dreams and exactly what he was doing, I was like all in on helping him fulfill it. I got so magnetized by his vision that it became like so cliche as it is. It's like, your dreams are my dreams. So anyway, back to my story. Where was I at? So I got so committed to finding a solution, to like understanding why we do things and how can we manage that in high pressure situations. Because it's easy to put in place when you're at home, when the stress isn't there or the pressure isn't there, or even like at a local smaller event. But when we get to these bigger events that these kids or these men have and women have worked so hard to get to, it's like everything's on the line. So how do we help them to think clearly in those minds, in that state? And so yeah, basically, I just went searching for who are the greatest minds in this around the world. And that's who I went and studied under. So fortunately, I come across Dr. John DeMartini from the DeMartini Institute based out of Houston in America. And he's internationally recognized as the leading expert in human behavior. And so I have then spent the last 4 or 5 years now learning directly from him, which has been absolutely incredible when it comes to finding new tools and strategies that we can use to basically harness the power from within and become a master of our own destiny instead of a victim of our history. He teaches us how to equilibrate the mind and work from a balanced state. So basically, over the last few years, every day, I would learn through books and mentors, and then Dean and I would frequently discuss it. Dean would explain his life experiences, and slowly we just together put all the pieces together. So moving back to 2016, we spent that entire 5-week break just doing that, diving deep. Obviously, we've dived a lot deeper since then, but even just piecing the bits together back then as we went through, after that race, we had a 5-week break. We returned to the second half of the season. And after that, Dean went on to win 52 national level races without dropping outside the top 2. So he clawed his way back to win his first championship that year, then backed it up the following 2 years with a perfect season in 2018. So pretty impressive, breaking that cycle of win crash to being so consistent. Meanwhile, while he was doing all the success on the track, I basically got exposed to a whole new way of living. I got exposed to a whole new way of thinking. And I found my passion for human behavior. And I got to constantly feed my curiosity about people and how the world and our minds work. Because I remember, even from a young age, I was fascinated with how ordinary people can go on to live extraordinary lives. And now I feel like I'm starting to get it. I start to understand. It comes from a different way of thinking, a different way of seeing the world. The people that I have met and come across and studied in the last few years, they think differently. And that's the only difference. Aside from that, every single human on the planet, we all have the same traits. We just express them in our own different ways and we think differently. And so I come to the conclusion that life is a game of perspective. So for what started out as wanting to help Dean to crash less has helped me tenfold. In the pursuit of answers, I have managed to dissolve years worth of emotional baggage of my own. I learned how to manage my own emotions and discover the hidden order in the universe that we live in. I tuned in to my truest, highest values. I structured my life around them, and I was able to find meaning and purpose back in my life, all of which has relieved me of so much unnecessary suffering over the years, which I'm sure many of you would probably be thinking about Dean's crash last year where he broke his back, and how I still recall when I ran into the medic 6 months later, he asked me how on earth I was so calm as a cucumber at the time of the incident. And so I'll definitely get into that in more episodes moving forward. But I just want you guys, the listeners, to know that there is so much that we can do and achieve with our minds, just if we learn to shift our paradigm a little bit, the way that we see the world, the way that we think, the way that we see challenges. With the help of some amazing mentors over the last 5 years, I feel like I've been guided to new heights that I once perceived unimaginable. And now I can't help but want to share this with the world, because it saddens me to know just how many motocross families are out there working hard, but getting in their own way, or mentally holding themselves back without even knowing it. Or how many kids are out there riding our tracks with anxiety and fears that put them at even a higher risk of injury. For as long as I can remember, we've been training our athletes to work on their bike skills and their physical body. But until we started delving deep into the mental side of racing, I had never heard of it in Australian motocross. Maybe it was being spoke about somewhere, but it wasn't being shared with the local and state level competitors that I was in circle with, and certainly not any of the weekend warriors that I know. So from my years of research on this topic, I can understand why very few people actually understand it themselves. There's so much fluffy stuff out there, like just be positive. I'll cover that in another episode. But I can see how confusing it can be for some people and challenging, as it requires us to take full responsibility for everything that happens in our lives. And even more importantly, full responsibility for how we feel. We're so used to being able to blame external situations, but when we start taking control, and I actually read a quote just recently, and it's from Da Vinci: "One can have no smaller or greater mastery than the mastery over oneself." So basically that now, and with everything, I feel like I'm on my own mission to share the insights that I've learned and continue to learn from the greatest minds on this planet, to help you, the listener here, see for yourself that motocross is more than just going fast. I'm committed to simplifying the mental side of motocross into bite-sized pieces of wisdom founded on universal principles that you can use and implement to not only thrive on the track, but off the track too, without using our excuses, no matter how valid they are, just learning to stay focused on the right thing at the right time and mastering ourselves. And I believe that together, we can raise the level of consciousness across our community, make motocross safer, and empower ourselves and our families with life skills that reach far beyond athletic competition. And that's probably enough for episode 1 before I mind boggle you with all of the different stuff that I am so excited to share and speak with you all about. So thank you so much for being here and for listening. I'll see you next week for our first deep dive into the foundations of human nature.